Hey guys, tonight we begin our journey not through sword-clashing battlefields or ancient libraries filled with secrets, but through silk corridors, whisper-thin doors, and candlelit chambers where hundreds of women waited, and waited, and waited some more. When you think of medieval China, what comes to mind? Jade bracelets clinking gently, scholars writing poems beneath the moon, and imperial ladies strolling through lotus gardens in flowing gowns, right? Yeah, about that. The truth behind palace life was far more bizarre than the history books will ever admit. Inside the Forbidden Palace, women were chosen often at barely 13 years old to serve not only the emperor, but an entire system built on silence, stillness, and schedules so weird they make modern skincare routines look sane. Wake up before sunrise. Yes. Shave off your eyebrows. Absolutely. Compete in poetry battles you didn't even write. Naturally, sit for hours without blinking just to prove your virtue. Constantly. And don't even think about eating garlic. It's not feminine enough. So the question is, could you survive even one day inside the walls of Imperial China's inner court? Let's find out. But before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. And hey, comment below with where you're watching from and what time it is. Dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive barefoot. Not because your shoes were lost, but because they were taken. Along with your hairpins, your given name, and your voice. You're 13, maybe 14. Your father is a lower level official who made one too many donations to the palace. Or maybe you were simply selected. Your neighborhood whispered about it like a curse. You were lucky, they said. The emperor would look upon you. You'd live in gold. You'd be silk. You'd be more than just a daughter. You'd be someone, except once you step through the vermilion gates of the inner court, you are no longer anyone. The first thing you learn is the layout, not of the entire palace. Heavens, no, you're not allowed to walk most of it. Just your quadrant. The weaving room, the sleeping quarters, the corridor lined with stone lanterns where you must bow before passing, and the courtyard where the older girls gather like quiet cats, eyes always watching. You're escorted by 2 eunuchs, one silent, one smiling too much. They speak in code, gently, instructing you to bow here to avoid that hallway, to never touch the lattice screens. He doesn't like fingerprints, one whispers. You don't ask who he is. There are no windows in your sleeping chamber, just screens. The scent is always the same pressed rice straw and powdered camellia. You're given your first robe. It's stiff. Blue-gray, not the silken ones you'd imagined. Your hair is stripped of ribbons and braided into a flat bun. You look in the bronze mirror, but you don't recognize the girl with the hollow eyes. Someone reads you your new name. Not even a name, really. More like a flower plus rank combination. Orchid second. You nod. You try to smile. The other girls don't smile back. On your first morning, the wake-up bell rings at 4:30. No, not a bell. A chime. Somewhere above you, a wind chime is struck manually, and you are expected to sit up immediately. Late risers lose speaking privileges. Not that you've said much yet. Your feet touch the cold stone floor. The servants have not warmed it with rugs. That only happens for the chosen ones, the women the emperor has favored this season. You wash your face with water, chilled by the night. No soap. Just a ceramic basin, a rough cloth, and a powder that smells vaguely of crushed shell and mold. Then comes the silent hour. For the first 30 minutes of every morning, no one is allowed to speak. It's not a written rule, but everyone knows it. It's when the palace listens, literally listens, to see who respects order. You sit with your hands folded. A senior girl, maybe 19, applies paint to her face. Her expression doesn't change as she coats her cheeks with a light dusting of ground pearl. She's already lost favor once. Her lips are painted thinner this time. She catches your eye briefly. "Don't blink too often," she says flatly. "It makes your thoughts look too loud." At sunrise, you are lined up. It's not punishment, it's inventory. You stand beneath the eaves of the outer corridor with 12 other girls. A eunuch passes with a clipboard. You are scanned from top to bottom. He pauses at your eyebrows. "Trim them," he mutters, then moves on. You nod. You don't know how. Someone will show you. Later, by 7, the palace has begun to move, but only within its own rhythms. The emperor is not awake yet. He won't be for hours. But you must be ready just in case. Always just in case. Someone once got promoted just because the emperor looked out his window and liked how still she was standing in the snow. So you stand. Still. In the wrong robe with untrimmed eyebrows, hoping no one looks at you. History books talk about the inner court as if it were a golden cage. But that's too simple. It was a theater stage. Every movement choreographed, every silence timed, every emotion filtered through 6 layers of gauze and duty. You don't serve the emperor. You serve the idea of him. A man you may never meet. A god who might forget you exist. A shadow who might one day call your name or call the girl beside you instead. But today is not that day. Today you are taught the bowing angles, 45 degrees for eunuchs of the 3rd rank, 60 degrees for the empress's attendants, and 90 degrees head, nearly to the floor, for the imperial concubines who walk past in silence, their shoes leaving no sound. One of them pauses beside you. She says nothing. Her perfume smells like crushed plum skins and smoke. She's 17, already a widow by protocol. The emperor hasn't spoken to her in 8 months. She's not allowed to leave the inner court, but she is still required to appear in public rituals, her makeup perfect, her sorrow muted. You don't know whether to envy her or pity her, so you do neither. You just keep standing. That night your feet bleed. You haven't spoken. You haven't smiled. You haven't laughed. You haven't even eaten much because you were too afraid to ask which bowls were yours. But you survived your first day. And that means something. Somewhere deep inside the palace, a candle is extinguished. Tomorrow it will begin again, earlier, colder, quieter. But for now your breath softens and your eyelids drift shut as the stone walls of the inner court whisper lullabies of duty, of stillness, of forgetting who you used to be. The second morning feels colder. Maybe it's the dampness in the stone, or maybe it's the knowledge that this is not a dream, not a visit, not a trial run. This is your life now. The chime rings at 4:30 again, exactly the same metallic clink as yesterday, except today you wake before it. Not from habit, but from the pressure in your chest. Sleep in the inner court is never deep. It's a shallow pool you float across, always half listening, half holding your breath. You sit up quietly as you were taught. You fold your blanket precisely 3 times. Lay it across the wooden cot. Bow to the floor, because even the stone is above you in rank. The water in the basin is colder than yesterday. Your fingers ache as they scrub your cheeks. A senior maid gives you a tiny packet of powder-whitened crushed rice mixed with pearl. It smells like old flour and promises. You apply it slowly, trying not to sneeze. The other girls don't speak, not because they're cruel, but because the second day is the one where you start to see who will last. Those who ask too many questions, those who cry, those who smile too much, they're noticed. And being noticed is never safe. You dip your hands in oil, just a little. Camellia, sharp and floral. It makes your skin shine, being a good thing, but not too much shine. That would be vanity. Vanity leads to whispers. Whispers lead to demotion. Already you're learning the real laws of the inner court. Never be the brightest, never be the dullest. Hover safely in the middle. Smile softly. Speak rarely. And above all, never assume kindness is just kindness. By 5, the corridors hum to life. Footsteps, fabric, the light scrape of wooden sandals. But no voices, only the rustle of expectation. The eunuch of the 5th rank appears carrying the daily rotation scroll. He doesn't look at you. He never will unless you're summoned. He moves like ink gliding across parchment, efficient fluid cold. You and the others form a line without being told. One girl is slightly crooked. A quick flick of the eunuch's sleeve and she stumbles into place. Her face burns. No one laughs. That's the other unspoken rule. Laughter is dangerous. Joy means you don't understand your place. Joy can be seen as rebellion. At sunrise, a bell sounds 3 times. This is not the emperor's rising bell. He sleeps longer. This bell is for the mid-ranking consorts, the women who used to be favored. Their rooms are in the west wing past the whispering pines and beneath the plum blossom trees. You won't walk there for another 3 years, maybe never. You glance toward the direction of the sound, but your feet stay rooted. A gentle slap lands across your wrist, not hard, just enough. Eyes forward, the older maid murmurs, "That part of the world isn't yours yet." You nod. Then you stare at the floor until it becomes the only horizon you know. Breakfast arrives. Not for you directly, food never comes directly. It is passed down a chain of hands, lacquered trays with porcelain bowls, inside congee thinned with chrysanthemum tea, a sliver of pickled daikon, a single piece of taro steamed into blandness. It is warm at least. You eat quickly without sound. The bowls are gathered with the same speed and silence with which they arrived. There is no conversation, no. How did you sleep, or did you dream of home? Dreams are dangerous. They make your present feel more like a prison. By 7, it's time for grooming inspections. This is where it gets strange. You are led into the sunlight, not much, just the sliver that reaches the side courtyard between the 2 stone columns. You stand in formation while a junior eunuch walks slowly past each of you. He holds a silk fan, not to cool himself, but to hold against your cheek. The fan is ivory white. If your makeup is too heavy, it leaves a mark. If your skin is too dry, the fan catches. You pass. Barely. The girl beside you does not. Her cheek shows oil. Not enough powder. She is escorted away, not cruelly, but like a doll, placed back in a box. She won't return today. Perhaps not tomorrow either. No one asks where she went. That would be improper. After inspection comes posture. Yes, posture. The emperor believes grace is the language of the divine. Therefore, every woman in the inner court must sit, walk, and stand like a crane in slow motion. You practice in the hall of quiet reeds. That's what it's called. Really, it's just a long corridor with no chairs. You and the others kneel. You're not told how long you must hold the pose. That's part of the test. 10 minutes pass. 20. Your knees begin to numb. You shift barely. A soft cough from a supervisor. No words, just that cough. You straighten again. Time does not exist in this corridor. Only pain. You wonder if the emperor even knows this happens. If he understands that while he dreams of peaches and cloud music, a row of teenage girls are kneeling in silence, pretending they are nothing more than painted screens. And maybe he doesn't know. Or maybe he does, and that's the point. After posture, you are assigned a task for the day. You receive embroidery, not because you're good at it, but because you're quiet. That your learning is the highest praise here. You're led to a room lined with silk bolts and baskets of thread. Your task is simple stitch a small lotus on an ivory handkerchief. But it must be perfect. If one petal is too large, if the lines are not symmetrical, it will be removed and redone. Not punished, just erased like it never existed. You too can be erased. So you stitch, and stitch, and stitch. The hours pass, measured not by clocks, but by the ache in your back and the change in the light. You aren't sure when lunch happened, or if it happened. By the time the sky turns gray-blue, your fingers are red. Your eyes sting. You've stitched the lotus 6 times. It was approved on the 7th. That's considered fast. At sunset, you are returned to your quarters. The chime rings once, an echo of the morning. You wash your hands in cold tea water, the scent of chrysanthemums rising faintly in the air. Another day has passed. You are still here, and that means you are winning, even if the prize is just survival. By now you've accepted that mornings begin with cold water and end with bruised knees. That eating is optional, but perfection is mandatory. And that silence is more than just a rule. It's a form of worship. Still, no one has yet told you about the beauty inspections. You learn about them not through an announcement, not through a written schedule, but through the quiet way girls begin to disappear every third morning. They return hours later changed, their faces smoother, paler, their eyebrows redrawn thinner than before, like a question mark trailing off mid-sentence. You ask nothing, until one day your name is whispered just after sunrise. Not called, just whispered. Orchid second. You turn heart pounding. A eunuch waits holding a tray. Upon it a set of thin razors, a dish of hot water and a brush made from squirrel hair. He gestures for you to follow. The walk is longer than expected. Through 3 corridors, past the moon gate, into a room draped in gauze, smelling faintly of mint and burned rice. A mirror waits, not bronze this time, but polished silver. You catch your reflection. You look tired. There are shadows beneath your eyes, a small pimple near your chin. Nothing catastrophic. But in this place, even a wrinkle in your earlobe could be interpreted as rebellion. A senior maid appears dressed in soft green robes. She does not speak. She lifts your chin with 2 fingers. Then with astonishing precision she begins. The first cut is to your forehead. Not deep, just a smooth glide of the razor, removing the small hairs along your hairline. These, you learn later, are considered barbaric remnants, a reminder of the countryside. Clean foreheads untouched by nature are the ideal. Then she moves to your eyebrows. No warning. One moment they're there, the next gone. What replaces them is artistry. Ink and powder drawn into perfect arcs, one called the silkworm, shape the other willow leaf. You don't get to choose which. Your face is judged like paper, what style suits its proportions, what shape whispers virtue. You are powdered next. Not lightly, but fully layer after layer of lead-white rice powder pressed into your skin until it looks less like flesh and more like porcelain. Your cheeks are brushed with a subtle pink, not the color of roses, but the shade of a radish, left too long in the cellar, faded, quiet, obedient. Then your lips, red, but only in the center. The outer edges remain pale. This is to give the illusion that your words are delicate, like they might vanish in the air before fully forming. When it's finished, you are not shown the mirror again. You are told to leave. And so you walk back the same way you came, slower now, because your face feels like a mask. You're not sure if it belongs to you. The other girls glance up as you enter. They don't comment, but their eyes linger just a little longer than before. That afternoon, the palace hosts a poetry session. Session is a generous term. It's not really a gathering for art, it's a performance review, disguised as culture. You are seated with 12 other girls in a circle around a low table carved from sandalwood. In the center, a tray of tea sits untouched. You're not allowed to drink it. It's for decor, a symbol of refinement. A eunuch arrives holding a scroll. Today's theme, he announces softly, is longing. No one sighs, no one flinches, but you can feel the tension rise like steam. Longing is dangerous. It's a theme that invites metaphors, and metaphors invite risk. A poem about a bird missing its nest could be interpreted as a criticism of the emperor's absence. A verse about a dried-up river might suggest political dissatisfaction. You are expected to be subtle, elegant, reverent, but also original, which is hard when most of you haven't left the same 4 courtyards in years. Some girls recite verses clearly written for them by senior attendants. You hear mention of drifting clouds, broken zithers, peach blossoms too shy to bloom. It's all very safe. Then your name is whispered again. Your heart jumps. You weren't told you'd be called. You stand slowly. Your knees crack. You hadn't prepared anything, so you recite a poem you remember from your grandmother. It's about a moth circling a lantern. Simple. Melancholy. No political undertones. You speak it slowly, the final line trailing off like the last flicker of light before sleep. When you sit, no one claps. That would be unseemly. But someone, perhaps the eunuch, nods, and that is more valuable than applause. Later, during embroidery hour, you are given red thread. This is a sign. Red is usually reserved for senior women. You wonder if your poem had anything to do with it, or if someone unseen, unheard was watching. You work carefully. One slip with red thread, and you'll be asked to start over. The lotus you stitch blooms beneath your needle. You realize that your fingers no longer shake. At dusk, a small tray is delivered to your room. Inside, a sweet rice dumpling with jujube paste. This is a reward, not publicly announced, just left quietly. You eat it slowly, savoring each bite. It's the first sweet thing you've tasted in weeks. You wonder what it means. Were you noticed? Or is this simply a mistake? In the inner court, kindness is always suspicious, even dessert. That night you dream of the moth, not circling a lantern, but flying out of a window. You wake before dawn. Again. But this time you're not afraid. You know the steps now. The water, the powder, the kneeling, the silence. It's not comfort. Not exactly. But it's rhythm. And in this place, rhythm is survival. There's a peculiar silence that settles over the inner court before breakfast. It's not the silence of peace, not even the quiet of sleep. It's something else, tense, anticipatory, like the entire palace is holding its breath, waiting to see who will be favored, who will be forgotten, and who will be fed. Because yes, being fed in the inner court is not a guarantee. You do eat, technically, you're not starving. But no one would call it dining. It's more like grazing, timed, controlled, and carefully designed to reinforce that your body does not belong to you. It belongs to the system. And the system has decided you don't need spice, warmth, or joy. You need obedience and porridge. The breakfast bell rings softly. At first light, not a grand chime, but a wooden clapper gently tapped twice. That's your cue to assemble. You walk with the others through the morning mist, down a narrow stone path flanked by moss and miniature pine trees that never grow too tall. Even the plants here know better than to stand out. You're assigned your place in the courtyard, third row, fourth from the left. This is a promotion from yesterday, slightly closer to the pavilion. It means someone noticed something, or someone forgot someone else. Either way, you bow at the right angle, precisely 45 degrees, and sit cross-legged on the cushion, provided. It's still damp from the night air. That's part of the test. If you flinch, if you twitch, if you so much as adjust your sleeve, someone might be watching. The food arrives. It's not served. It's revealed tray by tray like offerings to a minor deity you're not allowed to name. Your bowl contains congee, again, thin rice porridge, warm but utterly tasteless. Floating in it, a single sliver of preserved ginger and 3 goji berries arranged in a triangle. Next to it, a side dish of pickled radish carved into flower shapes. They're pretty. They're also slightly too sour. You eat them anyway. And then today's surprise, a steamed lotus seed bun, slightly cracked at the edge, revealing the faintest smear of bean paste. It's meant to be eaten last. It's the closest thing to dessert you'll see before the Mid-Autumn Festival. You chew slowly, counting each bite. 12, that's the number the older girls told you. 12 bites makes you seem delicate. 14 is greedy. Anything under 10 is barbaric. You smile inwardly. You've made it to 12? Then just as you place your chopsticks down, a hand reaches over and quietly removes your tray. Breakfast is over. You stand, bow again, and follow the group out. Not a word is spoken. You've learned by now that food is a performance. Not just what you eat, but how you eat. There are stories, hushed ones, traded like secret lullabies after lights out, about girls who chewed too loudly, who slurped their tea, who dared to bite instead of break. They were reassigned, not punished per se, just moved to the laundry quarters or to the garden shift, where your job is to sit beside potted orchids and encourage their bloom by reading aloud from Confucian poetry. Which sounds charming, until you do it for 5 hours straight under a sun you're not allowed to complain about. So you eat quietly, you sip your tea without ripples, and you never ever ask for seconds. Mid-morning arrives with another unspoken ritual, the inspection of scents. That's right. In the inner court, how you smell is as important as how you bow. Each girl is assigned a scent profile determined by birth sign, skin tone, and seasonal rankings. Yours as of this month is osmanthus and rice powder with a touch of sandalwood. You're expected to maintain this signature without deviation. Too much scent implies vulgarity. Too little, and you're considered neglectful. So every morning after breakfast, you kneel while a scent mistress walks past each girl, holding a single white silk fan. She wafts it near your sleeve, then lifts it to her own nose. No words, just a nod or a faint hum of disapproval. Today you pass. Barely. She hesitates for a second. Her nose crinkles, not in disgust, but in deliberation. Then she moves on. You exhale. Later you'll adjust your sleeve sachet, just in case. The rest of the morning is dedicated to refinement drills. You laugh at the term silently, of course. Refinement in this context means walking slowly while balancing a ceramic bowl filled with water on your head. You do this while reciting Tang poetry. The bowl is heavy, the poetry is obscure, and the floor is uneven. You pass one corridor, one turn, one line at a time. Halfway through a poem about plum blossoms blooming in late spring. The girl in front of you sneezes, her bowl tips, the water spills. A maid appears instantly with a cloth. The girl is whisked away, her fate unknown. You keep walking. Your bowl remains steady, but your throat is dry. At midday, you're allowed to rest. This is a technicality. The rest period is only 30 minutes, and most girls use it to redo their makeup, mend their shoes, or reapply scent oil to their hair combs. You lie down for exactly 9 minutes, then rise. Any longer and your hair will crease from the pillow. Another unspoken rule. Lunch is not served today. Instead, you're assigned fasting meditation. This happens twice a month, supposedly, for spiritual purification. Really, it's a budget thing, so you sit in the hall of lotus silence with 24 others facing an incense burner. You're not supposed to speak or move or even think. Of course you do think. You think about the lotus bun from breakfast. You think about the girl who sneezed. You think about how your mother used to braid your hair with fingers that smelled like soup. You think about who you are and realize you're not entirely sure anymore. The sun begins to lower. A bell rings once, then twice. Afternoon duties await. But something's different today. A messenger arrives, eunuch high rank. He calls 3 names. Yours is the second. The other girls look down instantly. That's the custom. No expressions, no congratulations. Being summoned could mean anything: favor, interrogation, reassignment. You bow, you follow, and your heart forgets how to beat. You don't know where you're being taken. The eunuch doesn't speak and you don't ask. His footsteps are steady and you try to match them, careful not to let your shoes scrape too loudly against the stone. The path curves more than you expect, through narrow side passages and under covered walkways where light barely filters in. You pass a courtyard you've never seen before, filled with chrysanthemums, even though it's not quite the season. Their petals are clipped into perfect spheres, like the palace has no tolerance for anything that grows too freely. You don't know if the silence is a sign of favor or doom. This isn't like the poetry summons where there's a theme and a structure and at least one layer of pretense. This feels different, raw. When you arrive, the door is already open. Inside is a chamber known only by rumor, the Moon Garden Receiving Room. No one you know has ever entered it. You step inside and lower your eyes immediately. The floor is polished wood, so clean it reflects the silk of your sleeves. A brazier smolders faintly in one corner, giving off the scent of clove and camphor. A woman sits on a low platform near the far wall. Her robes are layered in midnight blue and cream. She wears no jewelry. That's how you know she outranks everyone. The higher the status, the less decoration required. Her face is not old, but it's unreadable, smooth, as if carved from peach stone. You bow, and the eunuch leaves without a word. She gestures for you to approach, and you do, stopping at the woven mat precisely 3 paces away. Kneel, she says, and her voice is calm but dry, like paper left too long in the sun. You kneel. She studies you for a long moment, then unrolls a silk scroll beside her. On it are names. Yours is the second to last. She taps the scroll. You wrote about a moth. You nod. The emperor enjoys metaphors. Your heart skips. This is the first time anyone has said the emperor's name in your presence. Your handwriting, she continues, is average. Your voice acceptable. Your posture needs work. You swallow. She lifts her gaze. But you are obedient. And that, she says, is the rarest talent in this place. She rolls the scroll back up. you will be transferred to the southern pavilion. New duties. You'll assist in chamber preparations. You bow deeply. You have no idea what this means. But it's not punishment. And that in the inner court is as close as anyone gets to a blessing. By sunset, your things, what few you have, are packed and carried for you. You don't say goodbye to the other girls. That would be unnecessary. Your place is filled before your cushion cools. The southern pavilion is quieter, older. The corridors smell of pine oil and folded history. Your new quarters are small but clean. Your tasks are posted on a lacquered board just outside the door. Incense rotation pillow. Placement. Curtain alignment. It sounds like nonsense, until you realize these are the emperor's sleeping chambers. Not his private bedroom, but one of 3 designated evening quarters rotated depending on the season, the weather, and the mood of the stars. Your role is not to see him. It is to make the space ready. And that means perfection. The incense must burn evenly for exactly 1 hour. The pillows must be placed with the embroidered cranes facing east. The curtain cords must be tied in the double knot of longevity, but not too tightly, lest they appear eager. There's a handbook for this. You are given 3 days to memorize it. You memorize it in 2. And on the 3rd day, you're tested. A senior maid walks through the chamber with a brush in her hand, dragging the soft bristles along the curtains, the carpets, the hems of your robe. Each touch is a judgment. At the end, she nods once. You pass. From then on, you enter the chamber alone. It feels like walking into a myth. The walls are painted with flying dragons and clouds that seem to shimmer in candlelight. The bed is wide enough for 3 people, though only one ever sleeps there. The sheets are changed daily, whether they're used or not. You lay them with fingers, so careful, they barely touch. You place the scroll of evening poetry on the side table, never too dramatic, never too dull. The emperor may never see it, but it matters that it's there, because everything matters. The temperature of the water basin, the fold of the night robe, the placement of the sandalwood fan beside the mat. You once place it too close to the corner. The next morning, you're reassigned to incense duty for a week. That's the punishment. You never make the mistake again. Late one evening, you are told to prepare the room as if for use. This is different from the usual routine. The wording implies possibility. And possibility here is heavier than fact. You light the 3-wick lantern. You fluff the pillow twice, then a 3rd time for luck. You roll the scroll of poetry just slightly tighter. The poem is about a river that flows backward, and you're not sure if that's beautiful or ominous. You leave the room. The next morning, nothing is disturbed. The emperor never came. But your placement is not revoked. If anything, the meals you receive are slightly warmer now. The broth has ginger. The rice has a soft saltiness. These are small things. But in a place where girls disappear over a misplaced teacup, small things feel enormous. You begin to move with more confidence. Not arrogance. Confidence is quieter. It looks like steadier hands and fewer blinks. It looks like knowing which door to knock on and which to pass. You learn the names of people no one says. Aloud, the ranking eunuchs, the concubines who haven't been seen in seasons, the calligrapher who writes the emperor's dreams. And through it all, you stay invisible. That is your greatest skill. You do not seek favor. You do not gossip. You do not fail. You float. One night, a maid younger than you is caught crying near the furnace room. She misses her mother, that's all. She is reassigned to the outer gardens the next day. You never see her again. You tell yourself she's fine, but you never ask. because in the inner court, asking is more dangerous than silence, and you are trying very hard to survive. The days begin to blend, not because they are uneventful, but because they are carefully, meticulously, almost cruelly the same. Your hands wake before your thoughts do, already reaching for the water basin before your eyes are even open. The scent of crushed jasmine and ash from the morning incense becomes the anchor for your sense of time, and your feet learn to glide instead of step, as if contact with the earth too firmly might suggest you still believe you have control over your direction. You are in your third week at the Southern Pavilion when the poetry box appears. It arrives without announcement, placed silently on the end table near the Emperor's preferred tea set. It's a small lacquered chest, no wider than your outstretched palm, carved with plum blossoms and dragonflies. The lid opens with a delicate click. Inside are scrolls, dozens of them, each tied with a thread so fine you hesitate to untie them. But that is your new task. Every morning you must select one, just one. Place it beside the bedding before sundown. No duplicates, no repeats, and absolutely no poems about war hunger or dreams unfulfilled. You are told this with no explanation, so you begin reading, not leisurely, not for pleasure, but with the focused urgency of someone diffusing a very old, very poetic bomb. The poems are mostly from the Tang and early Song periods. Lots of moonlight mountains, longing glances across bamboo groves. All lovely, all harmless, until you find one that ends with the line, "My pillow cold, my sleeves heavy, my heart still." You pause, you read it again. It is beautiful, but is it sad? Too sad? What if the Emperor reads it and thinks you're implying something, that the room feels like mourning, that someone somewhere has regrets? You return the scroll to the box. You choose another. This one is about a fish leaping upstream, simple, joyful, clear. You place it carefully. That night the pillow is slightly moved, just slightly, enough to know it was used. You say nothing. The next morning there's a slip of silk under your door. A list, a schedule. You have been placed on active evening rotation. This means you are now among those responsible for preparing the Emperor's quarters on days when his presence is expected. Not confirmed, just expected, which is worse. Because when he's not expected, you know he won't appear. But when he might, you enter every room with the weight of uncertainty pressing against your ribs like armor too tight. The difference between favored and forgotten can come down to the scent of the pillow linen, or whether the scroll is tied with silver thread instead of red. One girl was demoted because she forgot to refill the inkwell on the writing table, another because she left the window open half an inch. You memorize every preference, every superstition. The Emperor doesn't like facing west during thunderstorms. He prefers bamboo motifs in spring plum in winter. His tea must steep for exactly 6 minutes, no more, no less. And absolutely no coriander, not even the smell. One evening you're running behind. A scent sachet breaks and the oil stains the hem of your robe. You wash it quickly, your hands shaking. When you arrive at the chamber, the doors are already open. A candle is lit. That means he's coming. You hold your breath, straighten the edge of the scroll, and step back just as the sound of footsteps approaches. But it's not the Emperor. It's a senior concubine. You recognize her immediately, not because you've seen her often, but because everyone talks about her like a story. She was chosen at 17. She hasn't spoken directly to another maid in 3 years. Her robes are always violet. She enters like fog, quiet, graceful, slightly terrifying. You lower your eyes, bow, and begin to back out. But she stops. "Wait," she says. Her voice is lighter than expected. You pause. She approaches the scroll. That poem, she murmurs, "Do you know it?" You nod. "It's my favorite," she says. Then she smiles and walks away. You stand still for a long time after that. You don't know what just happened or what it means. The next day, your assignment remains unchanged. No promotion, no punishment, no comment. But at lunch, your bowl has lotus seeds instead of taro, and your tea is warm, not lukewarm. Again, small things. But you notice everyone does. Days continue. The poetry box becomes your daily puzzle. Sometimes it feels like you're whispering through paper to someone you'll never meet. Other times, it feels like a trap, like each line you select might be misread, misunderstood, misinterpreted. There is a rumor whispered between folding screens that a girl once chose a poem with the word exile in it. The emperor didn't appear that night. She was reassigned to candle duty for a year. You never find out if it's true, but you never choose a poem with the word exile, just in case. Eventually you start writing your own verses, not to submit, not to share, just to feel like you exist in the space between someone else's thoughts. Your favorite one begins with, "The flower does not bloom for the bee. The flower blooms because it must." You never show it to anyone, but you read it to yourself every morning just once before you tie the next scroll. And somehow that is enough. You begin to learn their names not from conversation, but from the way the other maids step aside when they pass. The higher-ranking concubines do not speak to you. They rarely speak at all unless required. Their language is visual, a glance, a cough, a finger, tapping twice against a fan. And yet entire hierarchies shift from those gestures. You learn that Lady Zhen only walks along the eastern corridor, that Lady Hong prefers her rice with lotus leaf, not lotus paste, that Lady Mei, the quietest of them all, is the one most feared by the others, because the emperor always calls for her after thunderstorms. One morning you're summoned to deliver a scroll directly to the West Garden quarters. This is unusual. Normally eunuchs handle all personal deliveries, but the message is clear. Your name was selected. You don't question it. You walk the garden path slowly, careful not to step on the red stones that line the edge. They're decorative, but if one cracks beneath your heel, it's bad luck. You heard about a girl who did that once. She wasn't seen again. The West Garden quarters are different, warmer. The scent of sandalwood hangs in the air. You knock 3 times. No answer. Then a soft voice calls, "Enter." Inside the chamber is dim, the curtains drawn. Lady Hong sits near the window, her silhouette outlined against the bamboo shade. She does not look at you. "You chose the fish poem yesterday," she says. You nod, unsure how she knows. "My father wrote that poem," she adds. Your eyes widen slightly. "Don't look so surprised," she says. "Some of us were educated before we became property." The word lands hard, not because she says it with anger, but because she says it with absolute calm, as if it's no longer an insult, just a fact of life. She turns. "You have a good eye," she continues. "You pick poems that soothe. But one day you'll have to pick one that stings." You bow deeply. She waves her hand. You leave. Back in your quarters, the words linger. Pick one that stings. What would that even look like? That evening you choose a poem with sharper imagery. Nothing obvious, just a line about a crane that chooses to fly alone even though the wind is against it. The pillow is moved the next morning. And on your tray, The tea is darker than usual, steeped longer. Small things. Always small things. But they speak. You begin to understand that poetry here is less about beauty and more about power. The scrolls are messages coded and disguised in rhyme. Some women choose poems to flatter. Others choose them to provoke. A few choose them to remind the emperor of things he'd rather forget. There's a story told only in whispers about a concubine who once selected a poem about an exiled official who served faithfully only to die unremembered. The emperor was said to have thrown the scroll into the fire. That night no one was summoned. For 3 days afterward, no concubines were called at all. Some say he was mourning, others say he was enraged. Either way, the girl was never seen again. And yet the poem remains in the box, still tied with red thread. You don't touch it? Not yet. One afternoon during your scent rotation duties, you cross paths with Lady May. She doesn't speak, but she stops walking. Then softly, do you write them? You hesitate, then nod. She studies you for a moment. No one stays long unless they have something to say. She murmurs. Then she's gone. You stand there, heart racing, wondering if that was a compliment or a warning. That night you write a new verse. It's short. The fish does not ask the river for permission. It swims because it remembers the ocean. You don't submit it. Of course not. But it stays folded beneath your robe, pressed like a secret between fabric and skin. For the first time you wonder what might happen if someone else read your words. The next day the scroll you chose is missing. Not misplaced, not removed, just replaced. Someone else has chosen for you. It's a poem you would never have picked, too soft, too vague. It says nothing, means nothing. The emperor doesn't appear that night. Your tea arrives lukewarm again. Your hands tremble, not with fear, but with a strange quiet rage. It doesn't last, because you are still here. And in the inner court, that is the only definition of success that matters. Oh, and by the way, are you still awake? Or did I lose you somewhere between plum blossom and lukewarm tea? If you're still with me, blink twice, or just snore gently in Morse code. The weather shifts before the palace does. You feel it first in the breeze, the way it moves through the silk curtains, in the East Hall, carrying a sharper edge than before, then in the water basins, which no longer steam when poured, and finally in the tea served just a few degrees hotter, as if to brace you for what's coming. Autumn arrives without permission, and with it comes the annual inspection. Not of the palace, not of the servants, of the women. You first hear whispers about it 3 days before it happens. Words traded in coughs and careful blinks. No one says it aloud because if you speak it, you might be chosen for the wrong reasons. Or worse, forgotten altogether. The inspection is not medical, it is ceremonial. But don't let that fool you. It is invasive in its own way. Each concubine, maid, and attendant is to be evaluated for posture, complexion, scent, voice modulation, wardrobe, maintenance, calligraphy, improvement, and overall atmospheric contribution. Yes, that's a real phrase. You are judged on how much of a calming presence you bring to a room. As if serenity is something you can squeeze out of your pores if you just concentrate hard enough. When the day comes, the entire inner court is rearranged. Cushions are fluffed, walls are scrubbed, even the birds in the cages are rotated out for quieter birds. You're assigned to the third group in the fourth rotation immediately after midday tea, which means the inspectors will be mildly cranky and slightly full. You brace yourself. You are led into a long corridor flanked by silken partitions and golden lanterns. At the far end, seated at a jade-inlaid table, are 4 women and one very old man who appears to be asleep. He isn't. The first examiner is from the Bureau of Etiquette. She looks at you like she's reading a book that disappointed her years ago. She taps her fan against her palm and says, "Walk." You do. Not too quickly, not too softly. Heel toe, shoulder low, chin neither proud nor submissive. You glide like you've practiced, because you have. The second examiner checks your hands. She lifts them like porcelain cups, inspects the nails, the calluses. She sniffs the tips of your fingers. Too much rose oil, she mutters. You mentally make a note. The third examiner asks you to read. It's a passage from the classic of rites, something about filial piety and the virtue of not speaking unless spoken to. You find this ironic, but you read it anyway, smoothly, quietly, clearly. The fourth examiner asks you a question. What color is the wind in autumn? You pause. This is not a real question. It's a filter. Say something too poetic and you're labeled dramatic. Too literal and you're dull. You answer the color of sandalwood ash left after the last festival lantern burns out. She blinks once, then nods. You are dismissed. Not praised, not reprimanded, but your shoes are returned with the tassels brushed and tied. That's something. Back in your quarters, the others ask nothing. You say nothing. That evening you find a single dried chrysanthemum on your table. No note. You don't ask who left it, you just place it between the pages of your favorite blank scroll. Because if you've learned anything by now, it's that stories often begin without introductions, and they rarely explain themselves. A few nights later, you are reassigned to scent monitoring in the main hall during moon viewing. This is not a glamorous job. You're not allowed to watch the moon. Your task is to make sure the lanterns don't blow out and that the incense burns evenly. But from your corner, you can see shadows move. Concubines seated in lines. Eunuchs carrying platters of pomelo and rice cakes. The emperor somewhere behind a screen sipping tea he won't finish. You stand so still, your calves ache. Someone coughs near the edge of the platform. A concubine tilts her head ever so slightly. You spot her Lady May leaning toward another woman saying something behind her sleeve. They're not supposed to talk, but tonight is different. Moon festivals are the one time a year the rules bend. A little. At one point a breeze rushes in. All the candles flicker. One goes out, you relight it quickly. No one seems to notice. Until later when you return to your quarters and find a slip of paper beneath your blanket. It reads, "Even shadows deserve a story." It's unsigned. You don't sleep that night. Instead, you sit at your desk, pen in hand, writing the first line of a poem you never thought you'd dare to finish. The firefly doesn't need to chase the sun. Its glow was never borrowed. You fold it 3 times, slip it into the bottom of your sleeve. No one must see it. But it's enough that it exists. And just when you're about to drift off, body-heavy head, tilting against the wood frame, you remember, oh no. You forgot to check the east lantern. It was supposed to be extinguished before midnight. You jolt upright. You start to run. Then stop. Because let's be honest, who's still awake to notice? Speaking of which, you still here? Still hanging on to every whisper about dried flowers and sandalwood dreams? Or did you drift off 10 metaphors ago? If you're still listening, congratulations, you've officially survived more court protocol than most actual concubines. The embroidery room is colder than you remember. Not physically, though. Yes, the temperature has dropped, but emotionally, spiritually, as if the fabric itself has grown resentful from too many fingers, passing over it too many silent stories stitched in and never spoken aloud. You've been reassigned here temporarily, a reward, they said, for continued steadiness and character, which you know is code for you don't talk, you don't cry, and you don't faint in the hallway. Congratulations, you sit cross-legged on a woven mat near the open window, needle in hand, working on a silk panel that will eventually become part of someone's sleeve, though likely not yours. The design is predetermined, a pair of mandarin ducks on a rippling pond, symbol of fidelity, of harmony, of everything the inner court pretends to promote while quietly tearing it to shreds. You've stitched this same pattern 3 times this week. The ducks always look calm, but you wonder if you stitched just a hint of panic into their tiny eyes, would anyone notice? You don't try it. Not yet. You're not that reckless. But the thought stays with you. A few cushions over a girl you barely know, sneezes softly into her sleeve. No one acknowledges it. She resumes stitching. By now everyone has learned that weakness should be small, brief, and easily forgotten. The room smells like camphor and old rice starch. Your fingers ache. Your back curves in slow rebellion against good posture. But you keep going, because once you stop, the silence becomes too loud. Occasionally a supervisor passes by. She doesn't correct, she doesn't praise, she just watches. Like the embroidery is an exam, and your face is the final grade. At midday you are given a brief break. You stretch your legs, walk slowly to the courtyard, and sit near the koi pond. The fish are brighter than usual, or maybe you're just seeing color differently now after hours of staring at pale thread. Even orange feels revolutionary. A young maid brings tea. She forgets the second cup. You don't say anything. Instead, you sip slowly from your own eyes half-lidded, pretending for just 1 second that you're not in the palace at all, that you're somewhere else, somewhere where ducks fly and fish leap without permission. Daydreaming is dangerous, says a voice behind you. You don't jump. You've trained yourself not to. It's Lady Jeanne. Her robes rustle like paper. She doesn't sit. She simply stands beside you, eyes on the pond. When I was your age, she says, I used to imagine I was a brush stroke, that someone was painting me somewhere far away. You don't know how to respond, so you bow your head slightly. Then I realize she continues, the painter was always here, and the brush also here. We're just pretending we have edges. She walks away before you can decide if that was philosophy or just a very elegant insult. Back in the embroidery room, the afternoon sun casts long shadows over the silk. You resume your work. This time your ducks look tired. The supervisor stops behind you. You brace yourself. But then softly she says, "That's accurate." She moves on. You let out a breath so slowly it doesn't even register as relief. That evening after dinner, plain rice, pickled plum, and something pretending to be soup, you are summoned again. Not by name, just a knock on the frame of your chamber, and a gesture. You follow. Down familiar corridors, past unfamiliar doors. You're led to the lesser archive room. This is new. Inside scrolls are stacked neatly in rows, labeled by season, by dynasty, by poetic meter. And seated at the center, holding a brush, as if it were an extension of her soul, is Lady May. She doesn't look up. "Sit," she says. You do. She hands you a scroll. "Correct this," she says without losing its weight. You read it. It's a poem about sorrow, about waiting, about a lantern that never gets lit again. It's beautiful and heavy. You think for a moment, then pick up the brush You don't remove the sadness, you just adjust its edges, like trimming a frayed sleeve, not to erase the wear, but to keep it from unraveling. When you finish, she takes the scroll, reads it, nods once. "You'll assist here now," she says. No explanation, no request, just another quiet shift. You sleep that night with ink on your fingers and the faintest smile in your chest. Because for once you didn't just survive the day. You changed something. Even if no one sees it. Even if no one says thank you. Oh, and since we've paused for just a breath, how are you holding up still with me? Or are you stitching imaginary ducks in your dreams by now? If you're snoring, I won't take it personally. It just means I'm doing my job. You arrive before sunrise now? Not because you're told to, but because you want to. The archive room is quiet in the early hours, warm with the scent of old paper and ink, and you find a kind of peace there that no courtyard ever offered. You've grown used to the rhythm of the scrolls, the way a line of poetry can fall open like a door, revealing someone's hidden sorrow or secret hope from 100 years ago. You begin to recognize patterns. You can now tell when a poem was written by a widow, when it was composed during exile, or when it was carefully crafted to flatter a warlord too insecure to handle metaphors. You read, you correct, and occasionally when no one is looking, you write. It starts small, a line here, a stanza there, never signed, never submitted. But you fold each one carefully and place it beneath the floorboard near your cushion like pressed flowers no one's allowed to see. Your duties change. You're no longer in the rotation for chamber prep or incense lighting. Now you're simply with the scrolls. Some girls call you lucky. Others call you invisible. You don't mind either title. Both feel accurate. You still eat alone. You still bow when summoned. But something in your posture has shifted. You're not just surviving anymore. You're observing, collecting, turning the inner court into a kind of living poem, tragic, yes, but strangely elegant. One day you're asked to review a collection of winter poems sent from a southern province. They arrive wrapped in oilcloth, tied with coarse rope, and smell faintly of seawater and mildew. Most are dreadful, too long, too literal, too proud. But one, just one, stops you. It's short, brutal, beautiful. The snow falls but never asks the roof if it's ready. You sit there holding it for a long time. You read it again and again and again. And something inside you shifts. That night, you do something reckless. You place the poem in the selection box, the one meant for the emperor's evening readings. You don't sign it, you don't tell anyone, you just let it go. The next day, the poem is gone. No punishment comes, no reprimand. Just a quiet adjustment. Your meals arrive warmer. Your inkstone is replaced with a newer one, and your candle burns longer into the night. You say nothing, but you know. From that moment on, scrolls begin to appear in the archive without labels, untied, anonymous. Someone else is doing what you did, maybe because of you, maybe not. But the words are different now, softer, braver. You start to see verses about longing that don't disguise themselves behind moon metaphors, about anger that isn't buried under plum blossoms, about hunger, about stillness, about dreams that show teeth. Lady May notices. Of course she does. She doesn't say anything, but one morning she leaves a slip of paper on your desk. 4 characters brushed quickly, almost carelessly. Keep the ink wet. You don't need more than that. Another evening passes, then another. Then one night something strange happens. You're called not by a eunuch, but by name. Your name. Not your rank name, not your floral designation. Your real name. the one you haven't heard aloud in years. You don't respond at first. You think it's a mistake or a ghost, but the voice repeats it. Gently, patiently, you follow it. It leads you not to a pavilion or a hall, but to the upper library, a place normally reserved for the imperial historians and retired scholars who can no longer hear properly. Inside there's one person, Lady Hong. She sits at a table, fingers stained with ink. She looks up. "You're the one writing them," she says. It isn't a question. You say nothing. She nods. "Good." Then she stands, walks to the back shelf, and lifts a heavy book. She opens it. Inside are poems, pages of them. Some you recognize, some you don't. But one of them is yours. Not just inspired by yours. Yours. The fish does not ask the river for permission. It swims because it remembers the ocean. You blink. She closes the book. "I copied it." You don't ask how she found it. You just stand there, heart trembling in a way that no punishment, no promotion, no poem ever caused. She says, "We're all trying to leave something behind, even if we never leave the palace." Then she adds, "Especially if we never leave the palace." She lets you go without another word. Back in your room, you light a candle and stare at the wall for a long time. You wonder, has anything truly changed? Are you still the girl sitting quietly, stitching ducks onto silk? Or have you become the ink itself? Smudged, persistent, quietly staining things where no one expects, and are you still awake? Honestly, if you've made it this far, you either have a genuine love of 12th century calligraphy, politics, or you're too polite to fall asleep on me mid-poem. Either way, I respect it. The days shorten, not drastically, just enough that the lanterns are lit earlier, the corridors dim earlier, and the silence seems to settle in before you've had a chance to decide what kind of day it's been. You've stopped keeping track of the seasons with your fingers. Now you mark time by the shift in paper. The scrolls change texture as the weather cools their fibers rougher, their ink more hesitant to dry. Your role is no longer questioned. You are the girl who handles the words, the one they call for when a scroll has been damaged, or when a poem needs to be softened, or when the Empress herself receives a letter and wants to be sure it won't cause her embarrassment if read aloud. You have become invisible in the best possible way, until one morning a note arrives. It's wrapped in pale silk. No seal, no signature, just 5 words written in a hand you've never seen before. The Emperor requests your presence. You read it once, then again. The ink doesn't change the second time, but your heartbeat does. You fold it carefully and press it to your chest. For a moment, you forget where your feet are. Then you remember they are standing on palace stone. And your body, for all its quiet poems and gentle scrolls, is still just a vessel moving through someone else's story. You are escorted through a path you've never taken before. Not through the main corridors, not the audience hall, not the pavilion where concubines gather in hopeful postures. This is different. This is a private route used only on nights when the moon is too bright or the emperor too restless. You're led through a wooden gate past a single ginkgo tree that has already shed most of its leaves. A small pavilion sits in the clearing. There are no guards, no attendants, just one figure inside, seated at a table, back turned. You are told to enter alone. You do. Your footsteps are light, but not from grace, from sheer instinct. Every cell in your body tells you make no sound, make no assumption. The emperor does not turn. He's reading a scroll. It's not until he speaks that your breath catches. I wondered who was writing them, he says. The voice is younger than you expected. Not soft, not harsh, just human. You bow, deeper than you ever have. Your forehead nearly brushes the ground. He waves his hand and you rise. I don't want flattery, he says, still not facing you. I want truth. You say nothing. He turns the scroll over. It's one of yours. Not one you ever submitted. Not one anyone should have had access to. The poem about the girl who stitched ducks until she forgot her own name. Your lungs shrink. He places it down. I used to write, he says. Before the throne, before the rituals, before every word I spoke was recorded and interpreted. He finally looks at you, and you're surprised. He looks tired, not weak, not pitiful, just tired in the way only someone who's had everything can be. He gestures to the cushion opposite him. You sit. There is no wine, no music, no ceremony, only silence, and two people who suddenly have no idea how to talk. Finally, he says, your words make me feel like I'm being watched. Not by the court, not by enemies, by myself. From a version of me I forgot to be. You want to respond. But what do you say to a man whose face is on every coin, whose orders shape lives, and who now tells you he feels like a ghost inside his own skin? So you do the only thing you can. You hand him a scroll, one you brought with you. It's short, honest, a poem about a fish that cannot find the ocean anymore, and so settles for remembering how the waves used to feel. He reads it twice, then a third time. When he speaks, it's not to praise, it's to whisper, you shouldn't stay here. You freeze. You have a voice, he says, and this place eats voices. You nod, because of course you do. Because what else can you do? He stands, walks past you, pauses, then adds, but not yet. The palace still needs a little more truth before it can let go of the lies. He leaves. You remain seated for a long time. Only after the candle dies do you realize your hands are shaking. You return to your quarters in silence. There is no note the next day, no change in duty, no proof that the night ever happened. But your inkwell is full, and your candle burns longer, and your tea hot. Again, you go back to your scrolls. But now every time you write, you wonder who else is reading and what will they think, and then you laugh. Because even now, you're still writing as if the roof might collapse any moment. And you know what? That's probably the right way to write. Speaking of collapsing, how are you doing? Still sitting upright? Or has your spine quietly melted into the nearest pillow? If you're drooling just a little, I'm going to take that as a compliment. You don't tell anyone. Not about the pavilion, not about the poem, not about the way he looked at you like you weren't part of the machinery, but something strangely human. It becomes a secret you fold up and carry with you pressed behind your ribs, like a note no one else is allowed to read. In the days that follow, everything stays the same on the surface. You wake at the same hour. The basin is still cold. The scrolls still arrive bundled in silk and tied with ceremonial knots. But something inside you has shifted. You walk softer now, not out of fear, but out of curiosity. Like you're listening more closely. Like the walls might be telling stories back. They are. You begin noticing the invisible patterns that govern the inner court, the silent ways that power moves. It's not just in titles or rituals. It's in who touches whose sleeve, who's allowed to frown in public, who always gets second servings, even when the food is scarce. And then there's the linen roster. You stumble upon it accidentally one morning while looking for fresh inkstones in the storeroom. A list hastily written and pinned to the inner side of a drawer. Names, dates, assignments. Next to your name is a mark. It's not a promotion, it's not a punishment. It's a rotation mark, an unspoken warning that your time in this particular pavilion is drawing to a close. You've seen these before. Sometimes they mean reassignment. Sometimes they mean silence. You don't panic, but that night, for the first time in weeks, you lock your chamber door. Not because you think someone will come, but because you don't want them to. You begin copying your favorite poems onto rice paper. Tiny, neat characters, no flourishes, no signature. You fold each one into a small square and hide them inside the crevices of the palace, between cracks in the wall, behind loose floorboards, inside the bases of candle holders. You tell yourself it's not paranoia, it's preservation. If you disappear, at least the words won't. Some will survive, some always do. That week, the Empress falls ill. You're not close enough to see her. But the entire court feels it like the sun going behind clouds that haven't even arrived yet. Routines are interrupted. Tea deliveries are delayed. And suddenly everyone is performing virtue just a little louder. Even the quiet ones. You're summoned by Lady May. She looks tired. She hands you a letter and says, "Only, you'll read this for me. Out loud. Now." You do. It's a poem, but not hers. It's a confession, written by someone else, a concubine you've never met living in one of the outer halls. The letter is not treasonous, but it is deeply, painfully honest. It speaks of the emperor's distance, of longing that's gone sour, of pretending to smile while grieving the girl you used to be. When you finish, Lady May looks out the window for a long time. Then she says, "That's the only kind of poem worth keeping." You nod, but you both know what that means. You ask if you should deliver it. She shakes her head. "No. Bury it." You understand. You do. That night you take the scroll to the oldest tree in the east courtyard, the one that only blooms once every 3 years. You bury the scroll at its base. No one sees you. No one says thank you. But the next morning someone leaves you a fresh ink brush wrapped in yellow silk, a sign of respect, or mourning, or warning. At this point you've learned that everything in the palace can mean at least 3 things, and none of them are ever what they appear to be. You keep writing. You write even when you shouldn't, even when your hands ache, even when the calluses on your fingers split open and leave blood on the parchment. Because somehow pain has become quieter than fear, and fear has become familiar, and the only way to speak now is without speaking at all. Oh, and before I forget, you doing okay? Still upright? Or are you now emotionally curled into a metaphorical ball, under metaphorical silk blankets, wondering why your real-life tea doesn't come with quiet scrolls and dramatic courtyard rumors? If you're still here, I commend your stamina. You've officially outlasted half the concubines in this chapter. There's something strange about the way light falls through the palace. In late autumn, it doesn't just illuminate, it exposes. Everything is sharper, more angular, less forgiving. Even the dust seems to hang in the air longer, as if refusing to settle. You notice things more now. The way the walls creak just slightly after dusk. How the eunuchs walk more quickly when the weather turns. The way your ink, once smooth and fluid, now thickens in the morning and needs coaxing. You've become part of the palace itself. Quiet, watchful, permanent. Only in theory. The scrolls keep coming, not just from within the inner court, but from beyond. Poetry from generals pretending to be sensitive, letters from distant scholars who hope a well-placed metaphor might earn them a seat at the next festival. You read them all. Some you correct, some you rewrite entirely, some you simply fold and tuck away because even bad words deserve a soft place to land. Your fingers have changed shape. The calluses are now ridges. Your nails are always stained. You've forgotten what your handwriting used to look like when you weren't being careful. Now even your accidental loops are tidy. You never signed your name, not once. But someone knows. One afternoon, a eunuch delivers a bundle tied in black cord. No note, no seal. Just a name you haven't heard in years, your name written on the outer parchment in delicate, uneven brushstrokes. Inside a set of old poems. Yours. Not the ones you buried, not the ones you hid, but ones you wrote in your first season here. Unedited, raw, imperfect. You read them slowly. There's one about the smell of rain in an unused corridor. Another about wishing you could trade places with a candle because at least candles are allowed to burn out. You didn't think anyone kept them, let alone copied them. You sit for a long time with the bundle on your lap. Then slowly, you begin to copy them again, this time with steadier hands and fewer apologies. 2 days later, your scent profile is changed. No explanation. You're moved from osmanthus and plum to pine and inkroot. It doesn't seem like much, but in the language of the palace, it's a rebranding. Pine is for clarity. Inkroot is for those who don't need to be sweet to be remembered. On the third night, you're told to report to the Hall of Listening Screens. You've only heard of it. It's used when someone wants to hear you without seeing you. When your words matter but your face doesn't. The room is long and narrow, lit by recessed lamps. A screen divides the space. You kneel on a cushion that's already warm. Someone was here before you. From the other side, a voice. Female, calm, measured. You don't recognize it. She asks you questions. How many scrolls have you corrected in the past year? You answer around 300. How many of your own have been submitted? You hesitate, then lie. None. A pause. Do you consider that honesty or survival? You don't respond. That's what I thought, she says. You're dismissed just like that. You rise legs stiff and exit the hall in silence. By the time you reach your room, there's another bundle waiting for you. This one is smaller, inside a brush. But not just any brush. It's the kind used only by imperial scribes. Black lacquered handle, weighted for long copying hours. It's not a gift. It's a request. You've been chosen to transcribe the emperor's autumn thoughts. These are not proclamations, not edicts, just private musings, written hastily in the early hours, dropped off with ink smudges still fresh. You copy them by lamplight. You're not allowed to edit, not even a stroke. You just preserve them. Sometimes you read them aloud to the silence, just to hear how human they sound. One ends with, I miss the days when I could forget myself for a moment and just watch birds. Another, my voice echoes too much in large halls. No wonder I stopped speaking. And one that you read twice then, carefully copied with your hands shaking just a little. If I disappear, will my image still govern? You don't know what to make of that one. You just write. And after a while you realize something. The palace has stopped feeling like a prison. It now feels like a book you've been rewriting one character at a time, hoping someday someone will read it backwards and see what you meant. But it's still the same palace. It still swallows names and forgets faces, still teaches you to bow before you learn to speak, still rewards silence and punishes melody. Yet here you are, still writing, still watching, still threading ink through paper like it's the only form of rebellion that doesn't leave a bruise. Oh, and hey, still awake. If you are, I'm impressed. If not, well. Sweet dreams, scroll keeper. You've earned it. It begins with a name you don't recognize, spoken softly during an evening gathering of the scroll keepers. It floats past the incense smoke like a thread unraveling from someone else's story, lingering just long enough to feel important. You don't ask about her. You've learned that names in the inner court often belong to people who no longer do. But that night, while sorting through old records, you find it again written in the inner seam of a forgotten scroll. It's not a poem or a letter. It's a registry. Thin parchment. The ink faded and the brushwork impersonal. It lists her name, her scent assignment, her seasonal role. And then on the final line, it simply says, erased per directive, no longer in rotation. You sit there with the document in your hands, pulse quiet mind, louder than usual. There is no note of death, no transfer, no mention of reassignment. Just a clean erasure. As if a person could be reduced to a scheduling error, you copy the entry. Not to challenge it, not to record it formally, just to remember that she existed. You fold the copy into a tiny square and place it behind the base of a lantern in the hall of lapis shadows. No one sees you. No one questions the act. But the next morning your ink has been changed. It's smoother, darker, more responsive to pressure. A small upgrade, a soft signal that someone knows what you did. The emperor's writings grow heavier that week. His prose shifts from idle reflections on river fog and tea leaves to fragmented lines about forgetting about the weight of rituals, about vanishing into one's own silence. You aren't supposed to respond. But one night after copying a particularly raw passage, you slip in a poem, not one for the record, just a single verse folded beneath the scroll. You don't sign it. You barely breathe as you place it. The poem is short. Even stone remembers the warmth of the sun. It no longer sees. No one replies. But 2 days later, your duties change. You are removed from the transcription rotation. No explanation is offered. You're reassigned to scent, preparation, lavender, orange peel, ginger root, mixed with rice wine. Technically, it's a lesser post, but the air is softer there. No one asks what you think. No one watches you write. And so, of course, you start writing more. Not for the court, not for history, just for yourself. You begin composing small pieces during breaks, hiding them where they won't be found or where only the right person might find them. Beneath floorboards, tucked into the spines of old scrolls, behind the legs of incense tables. You call them anchors. Small weights to tether your memory to keep you from dissolving into the silence like so many before you. One morning you catch another maid, straightening a cushion a little too carefully. You wonder if she's doing the same, leaving traces, soft rebellions, quiet proof that someone lived here with more than just obedience in her hands. Then one afternoon you return to your room and feel it immediately. Something has shifted. Your bed is not quite where you left it. The ink brush on your table has been moved a finger's width. You lift the loose floorboard. The bundle of poems you'd been hiding there is gone. Not misplaced. Taken. You sit down, hands, still heart caught between fear and a strange kind of mourning. You tell yourself they were just pages, but you know better. They were you. That night you sleep only briefly. Before dawn, a package arrives, wrapped in brown cloth, unsealed. Inside your poems, all of them, rewritten in new ink, carefully bound in red string. At the very end, there is one added line written in a hand that is not yours. Some things are worth keeping, even if no one knows who kept them. You read that line over and over. It doesn't erase the fear, but it gives you something to hold. You carry on, not because you feel brave, but because the words won't stop arriving. You continue to prepare scents, to crush herbs, to light oils. But your thoughts drift more than they used to. You catch yourself composing lines in your head while sorting dried petals. Once you write a poem on the back of a spice ledger. You don't remember doing it. You find it 3 days later and it makes you laugh, not because it's good, but because even your body is writing now. And just as you begin to settle again, someone leaves you a new brush. It's the same model used for imperial correspondence, too fine for perfume rosters or linen tallies. No note, just the brush, placed where only you would find it. You stare at it for a long time. You don't use it. Not yet. But you don't give it back either. Oh, and by the way, are you still there? Still cozy in your blanket fort of whispering silk, perfumed paper, and slow burn rebellion? Or have I lost you to the rhythm of crushed lavender and candle smoke? If you're still listening, blink slowly in solidarity. You're practically part of the archive now. You don't use the brush immediately. For several days it just sits there on the edge of your table, still wrapped in the red thread like a sealed whisper. You continue your duties, grinding dried petals for incense, folding paper for sachets, preparing oils to be warmed at precise hours of the day. But your eyes always wander back to the brush. It doesn't feel like a tool. It feels like a question. Who left it? Why? And more pressingly, what will you write if you dare to touch it? Eventually you do. You unwrap the thread slowly, like you're untying someone's confidence. The weight of the brush surprises you, not heavy in the hand, but meaningful in the air. It's the kind of object that expects something honest in return. You begin to write again, not in hiding this time, and not with fear trembling in your fingers. You write with purpose. You write short verses, small observations, even strange half-memories that arrive like broken feathers in your thoughts. You remember the sound of your mother laughing while snapping bean pods, the scent of rain on clay roof tiles when you were 6, the way a neighbor's daughter used to pretend her braid was a sword. The details come back in pieces and you let them shape your ink. You don't sign them, you don't announce them, but you no longer hide them either. You slip them behind shelves in the library, beneath the edge of a tea tray, inside the folds of ceremonial sleeves. They are tiny acts of presence. They don't shout, but they shimmer. And someone notices. You begin to hear phrases that echo what you've written, spoken in courtyards by women you've never met. A line you invented shows up etched into the soft wax seal of an herb packet. Another scribbled faintly on the bottom corner of a silk robe. It's like you've become a rumor, but one made of poetry. Then one morning just before breakfast, a servant approaches you quietly and murmurs, "The silent pavilion is open to you." That's all. No instructions, no accusations. Just that. You nod. You pretend you know what that means. Later after lunch, you follow the outer wall of the garden until you reach a narrow, unmarked building with sliding doors and wide eaves. No guards, no foot traffic, no curious glances. You step inside. The air smells of old ink and new questions. Inside are long, low tables, each with a brush paper and a small stone for pressing corners. Women sit silently. No one looks up, no one greets you, but there is no fear in their silence. It's the kind of quiet that knows its own strength. You take a seat. You write. For hours, it seems. Time stretches here like fabric in warm water. You don't notice how long you've been inside until the angle of the light shifts and lanterns are quietly lit. When you finally rise, your fingers are ink-stained, your back stiff, and your thoughts oddly clearer. As you leave, a woman near the door gently presses a folded slip of paper into your palm. You wait until you're back in your own quarters to read it. The message inside is brief. What you are doing is being read. There's no name, just those words. You sleep unusually well that night. In the following days, the pavilion becomes a rhythm. You go there when you can. You see familiar faces, but no one ever speaks. The silence becomes a kind of language. Sometimes someone leaves behind a poem in the corner unsigned. Sometimes the room smells like ink and fear, and sometimes it smells like rain on stone. You write, and you begin to notice that the things written in the pavilion have lives of their own. One day you spot a line you'd once written, delicately embroidered into the hem of a robe worn by a lady in waiting. Another time it's painted discreetly along the inside of a folding fan, only visible when fully opened in bright sunlight. You say nothing, and neither does anyone else. But it is clear something is happening. The verses are not protests, not politics, but they are memory. And memory in the inner court is a radical act. You notice that women once posted in servant roles now appear in more thoughtful places, the archives, the inner kitchens, even near the empress's chambers. Their gazes are sharper, their hands steadier. There's a current in the palace almost imperceptible, but real. It isn't revolution, it isn't resistance, but it is something. A slow stitching of voice back into a place designed to erase it. Your name may never be known, but your words, your metaphors, your rhythm, those are beginning to echo. They shape the air like scent. And oh, before we close this chapter, how are you doing, friend? Still awake, or have I lulled you into a poetic coma? Did the pavilion's silence get to you? Or was it the embroidery part? If you're still with me, maybe blink once or whisper a haiku in your sleep. Your hands, once clumsy with ink, now move with quiet certainty. You no longer count the strokes or measure your metaphors. Writing has become a kind of breathing, invisible but essential. In the silent pavilion, the days pass like silk sliding over lacquered wood. You begin to know women by the shape of their brushwork, by the tension in their shoulders, by the pauses they take before beginning a line. And strangely, you feel known as well. Without ever speaking, without ever exchanging names, a strange intimacy forms in silence. You are no longer alone in the palace. You are part of something, even if that something is unspoken. One evening, a faintly familiar melody drifts through the open slats of the pavilion wall. Someone is playing a guqin in the garden beyond. The notes are slow, deliberate, not for performance, but for memory. You recognize the tune. It's the lullaby your aunt used to hum when your mother had migraines and the house had to be quiet. The tune tugs at something in you. You set your brush down. Outside, under the branches of a pomegranate tree, you see an older woman, head bowed over the strings. She plays like she's weaving time itself. You don't disturb her. You don't approach. But that night, your dreams are filled with sound. The next morning, when you arrive at your usual table, there's a folded paper waiting. It's not one of yours. It isn't a poem. It's a memory written plainly, honestly. A woman remembering how her mother taught her to thread a needle with her mouth when her fingers were too cold to move. It ends with, "I wonder if I imagined her hands, or if mine have only become hers." You reread it several times, and then without thinking too hard, you write your own. You write about the first time you saw snow, how it made the palace look like a dream someone forgot to finish painting. You write about the fear of slipping, of being seen, of not being seen. You write about the heat of hot stones tucked inside your sleeves to fight the cold, and how the burn on your wrist never really faded. You sign nothing. But the next day, another memory appears, then another. The pavilion shifts. It becomes more than a place for poetry. It becomes a quiet archive of womanhood. Some entries are painful. A concubine recalling the taste of ginseng she was forced to chew until her tongue bled. A servant writing about a night she carried a miscarriage, in secret burying it under the herb garden while everyone slept. But even these are written gently. There is no vengeance in the ink, only witnessing. And it makes you realize how rare it is to simply tell the truth in a place built on performance. By now you've become someone others watch, though never directly. You'll find your water pot refilled before you arrive, a seat left empty beside yours, once a hairpin carved with a phoenix placed quietly on your folded robe. You never see who does these things, but you understand the pavilion has its own language of care. Outside of it, the palace remains unchanged. Schedules still rule the hours. Etiquette still breathes down your neck. The empress still moves like a floating bell, and her shadow still silences entire courtyards. But you and the others, you have this secret, not one of betrayal or rebellion, but of being real. And then one afternoon it happens. The empress herself enters the pavilion. It's subtle, no fanfare, no guards. She steps inside like a breeze. Her hair is unpinned, and she carries no scrolls, just her hands resting loosely at her sides. Every woman in the room stiffens, but no one bows. That's the rule here. In the pavilion, rank does not speak. The empress walks past the tables. She pauses near yours. Her gaze flickers not at your face, but at the paper before you, half filled with lines about the feeling of walking through fog. She moves on. She sits. She writes. No one breathes for several minutes. And then, as naturally as she came, she leaves. The paper she wrote on remains behind. You don't touch it. No one does. But that evening the copy appears in every corner of the pavilion. The empress's words are simple. Even the moon envies those who sleep without duty. The effect is seismic, but no one says a word. Over the following weeks, subtle changes ripple through the inner court. The flower arrangements in the Hall of Purity include wild herbs now. The calligraphy scrolls displayed in the tea room begin featuring unsigned verses, some of which are unmistakably familiar. Women in high positions begin asking after lower-ranked attendants by name. One day, an old kitchen hand is invited to recite a poem before a banquet. Another, a cleaning maid, is quietly reassigned to the archives. You never speak of the pavilion outside its walls, but it begins to feel less like a secret and more like a shared understanding. A soft uprising made entirely of ink and memory, of brush strokes and breath. You find yourself smiling more, not widely. Just a twitch of the mouth when passing someone in the corridor and recognizing the tilt of their sleeve. Oh, and dear listener, are you still with me? Still afloat on this tide of slow revolution and tea-stained scrolls? Or have you already drifted into dreams where you too write in silence and wake with poems on your palms? If so, no judgment. But if you're still awake, maybe stretch your fingers. Someone might be refilling your ink pot right now. Seasons shift in the palace like paper fans unfolding quiet, deliberate, beautiful from a distance, but stiff with intention. You begin to lose track of how long you've been here. Not because the days are the same, though many are, but because time itself feels thinner, like silk, stretched too long over a frame. Some mornings you wake and forget your real name, remembering only the one your friends in the pavilion used for you. River Ink, they called you because your poems always began with water. Winter returns with less malice this year. Or perhaps you've grown used to its edges. The stone corridors are just as cold, but someone always leaves a hot brick at your feet. Your shoes go missing one morning, and when you find them again, someone's sewn a lining of rabbit fur into the soles. You suspect who did it, but you never ask. In the pavilion, questions are currency. Silence is trust. On the last night of the lunar year, when the moon is thin and the air smells like sweet taro and distant firecrackers, you and several others linger in the pavilion long past curfew. No one speaks. Instead, one woman begins humming the old lullaby again, and another braids her hair without a word. You write something short on a torn scrap of rice paper and slip it between the floorboards. The next morning you find dozens of scraps tucked into your robe pocket. None are signed. All are lovely. One simply reads, "May you never be needed for anything but joy." Another says, "My sister once said your voice sounded like plum wine poured too fast." You tuck these away and pretend not to smile when the Empress walks by and pretends not to see you grinning. But nothing stays untouched forever. News reaches the pavilion quietly at first. One of the women has been reassigned, upgraded, they say, married to a border general. Some call it an honor, others call it exile. You receive no letter from her, only a final brushstroke left where her inkstone used to be a spiral. You wonder if she meant a snail or a storm, maybe both. Then another woman vanishes. No notice, no reassignment. Her poems stop appearing. Her water pot goes dry. Her slippers are found tucked neatly under a cedar bench. The pavilion grows quieter. You begin to fear the thing you helped build. It had felt gentle, subtle, but maybe it was also a risk, a mistake even. You write less, watch more. The Empress doesn't return. The scrolls she left behind are faded now, tucked too far up the beams to read. One night as you lie awake staring at the carved roof tiles, you remember something your mother once told you. Silence is only golden until it's mistaken for consent. You sit up. You light a lamp. You begin writing again. You don't write to rebel. You write to remember. You write about the woman who sang lullabies to herself while cleaning the ink trays, about the maid who only wrote in green ink because it reminded her of the rice fields back home, about the one who always carried dried orange peel in her sleeves and gave it to anyone with a cough. You write their names, not their titles, not their ranks, just the syllables they loved best. The next morning you place the scroll in the center of the pavilion. You leave it open, you leave it unsigned, you leave it there. You don't know if it will disappear like the others. You don't know if you'll be questioned. But you do know this: for one moment in one place, the women of the palace wrote themselves into being, not as shadows, not as ornaments, but as people, whole, tired, brave, terrified, and real. And maybe that's enough. Maybe being remembered is its own kind of freedom. And now, dear listener, if you've somehow remained awake this long, I applaud you. But also gently, I question your priorities. You could have been dreaming of moonlit pavilions, of ink-stained fingers, of phoenix hairpins, and lullabies floating through cedar halls. So let's do that now. So now, as the lanterns fade and the courtyard empties into shadows, perhaps it's time to let go of the palace too. Not all at once, but slowly, like removing hairpins before bed, one by one, letting each memory fall like a petal. The weight of silk, the ache of calligraphy, the hush of women who dared to dream in silence. Let those images settle at the edge of your mind, not sharply, but softly, like mist curling around morning bamboo. If you listen carefully, you might still hear it. A faint brushing of ink on rice paper, a hush of slippers down a corridor, a melody half hummed by someone who no longer remembers the lyrics, but carries the tune anyway. The pavilion may no longer exist in bricks or beams, but it lingers where all quiet rebellions, due in breath and memory, in the folds of a dream you won't quite recall upon waking. So tonight, if you find yourself drifting, know this: you are not alone in the dark. Somewhere across time, a girl once looked up at the moon through a carved lattice window and wondered if anyone would remember her laughter. And somehow tonight you did. Now dim the lights. Let your thoughts untangle like thread. Curl deeper beneath your blanket and exhale everything you don't need to carry into tomorrow. There's no curfew here, no court etiquette. Just you and sleep and stories, waiting on the other side of silence. Good night, dreamer.